6th annual Jesajas Berlin Day, organized by the Soros Foundation Latvia and the Jesajas Berlin Association. I am Andris Aukmanis, co-founder of the Jesajas Berlin Association and executive director of the Soros Foundation Latvia. This is a special year for us, since on June the 6th, Sir Jesajas Berlin would have been 105 years old. And we had this first conference on his centenary in 2009. The purpose of this annual event is to pay homage to this eminent thinker and historian of ideas, as well as to debate the values that he defended: pluralism, liberalism, tolerance, and personal liberty. This year, the overarching theme of the Jesajas Berlin Day is the collision among privacy, new media, and national security concerns. I would like to thank the European Commission representation in Riga for its significant financial support, as well as our media partners, Satori, Delphi, and Politica LV. Now to our debate, the organization of which I'd like to thank the Latvian Debate Association. The proposal this year is, privacy is dead. And we have 6 debaters from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And now I shall pass the baton, I guess he has his own baton, to Gediminas Užuraitis, who will introduce the debate team and tell you a bit about the debate process and inform you about how this will all happen. Gediminas, please.
Thank you very much. Well, this is loud. Okay. So we have 2 sides here today in this debate. I stand on the proposition side together with Victor and Ruta, my teammates, and on the opposition side we have Arvidas, Doris, and Tonis. And we are all in some way either friends of members of Kotudoma, the Latvian Debate Association. We're very happy that they invited us to come here. How this debate will happen is that during the next hour or so you will see 6 speeches, approximately of 7 minutes. We will each be trying to bring up kind of new arguments, and then the last speaker will hopefully give also some sort of a summary and comparison of how the debate happens. During the debate we also will try to interact with each other and at some points stand up and ask questions and try to see whether your arguments directly clash with each other. That's what we mean to do to make this a more entertaining experience for us. Last notes is that today we're not actually representing our opinions, we're representing the sides of the arguments. This is what we try to promote as a debating culture and as an educational exercise. And all that said, then I will start by delivering the first speech, and then we'll move on to the opposition speaker, and so on and so forth. So, oh, my colleague even has a timer for me. So, privacy is dead. What do we mean by that? So to set up this debate, we think privacy is dead because it is not valued as it used to be by society, and therefore we also think that it should be upkept to some artificial standard externally, be it by government control or something else. We think that privacy is not an internal value or a moral value that people have, or a right that people have. Privacy is a social norm that has always been kind of socially constructed by society and always changed. So what we mean by that is that it has always been changing, and the thing is that it has been decreasing. So for instance, at the times when Jesajas Berlin was young, many parts of your privacy have had very high barriers. So for instance, it would have not be deemed acceptable to be emotional publicly. It would not be deemed acceptable to show your feelings publicly. Many things that we consider now to be very normal. Somewhat 50 years ago, in the US, with more of the liberal thinking revolutions, we think that that privacy barriers went a lot of ways down. People began to be more emotional, more open to their feelings, more open to their identities publicly. And what we see now is that people have changed changed even more, and the barriers are so low that we can deem to say that the privacy conception, as we thought about it, or the values that our parents grew up with, when it regards to privacy, are literally dead. We think like many examples of that exist. So, for instance, like emotions for men would have been unacceptable many years ago. But as society progresses, people stop believing that it's okay to kind of lie about it publicly. And then more and more via societal change, men become as emotional as women. And we think that's completely normal. It's better for people's identities and more empowering. So, I'm going to deliver two arguments and then continue on for this debate through the prop line. We'll even see more good points. First thing I want to talk about is identity. So shaping who you are in terms of privacy. Think that your identity is, like everything who you are, is primarily external. It's all you are is shaped through your interactions with society rather than just your interaction or your belief of who you are. It's how you signal to others and how you express yourself. We think that moving to less privacy is therefore very okay for us as a society because it allows us more forms of expression. But we're not unhappy to claim today that privacy is dead because we think that it allows people less privacy to be more different and more distinct, move more away to the norm, more to a personal liberty kind of state that Jesajas Berlina, we believe, would have stand for. We think that this involves things like, for instance, your sexuality, which would have been a deep part of your privacy before, and you wouldn't have not kept it public. While as now in our societies, more personal things deemed before, like sexuality, are in a second, are deemed kind of normal to be public, and therefore individuals can shape their identities to be more different than others, or to a full extent more representatives of who they really are. And we think that is what personal liberty should stand for. Before that, yes.
But even in a system where privacy is actually valued, in that system, every single person can opt in and say if he wants to actually, denounce his privacy, a person can do it. Why should every single person denounce their privacy, basically?
Well, we think it has many benefits. And this is my next point, about how this makes the societal interactions better. We think today that value lives in a network world. I think that less and less privacy creates more cohesion in our societies. Why is that the case? We think that that's very much the case from sort of a network science perspective, and how people connect to each other, and then more links and ties are created. We think that firstly, it helps you embrace being yourself more, because that the things that used to hold you back become more acceptable publicly once everyone is doing it. So this is again the example of, for instance, male emotions that weren't used to be kind of normal, let's say 50 years ago when my parents were growing up, and are very normal now, because people began to express them publicly, and therefore it became like a normal thing. I think secondly, it becomes much easier to find people more similar to you, because what used to be the case of a huge information asymmetry between individuals is no longer the case when more and more of our personal details are public. We think that this information asymmetry is rather oppressive, because if you don't know others like you get closed out. You grow up to have like an internal argument with yourself because you don't know whether it's normal to be in that sort of way. So for instance, if you grew up in a closed religious community, you would not understand that it's okay to be different. While in the 21st century, where you have loads of openness and interactions online with people you might not know, but because of low privacy barriers, you still can know them in a very meaningful way, and you can understand there are many people like you, and therefore you can agree to, you don't have an internal conflict with yourself that you're somehow not normal. And we think thirdly and most importantly, relations of trust in society. That cohesion is, we think, is the sociological basis of human interaction, meaning to live together, we have to understand each other, and we have to at some point relate to each other and be friends. We think that less barriers of privacy create more cohesion and trust. When people become more and more open about themselves, meaning they turn to exposing more and more about who they are, they can find it easier to connect to other individuals rather than being very closed off. We think that it makes you easier to connect not only with your close circle of friends in 1 minute, but also it becomes easier to connect with like a random person on the street. It's easier for you to make new connections where people are more open about themselves. We think this is very good for society because when more trust and more cohesion happens, then people are less risk averse and people turn to create more opportunities. There's more efficiency from that information being out there and from more connections happening more easily. Yes?
But you talk about those ideal societies which are fully tolerant, but they do not exist in reality. We talk about coercive societies, in which case, when your identity is and your privacy is not protected, that it means that you will not be able to behave according to your preferences, neither in private nor in public, because there are societies that oppresses you from your preferences. So, how do you deal with that?
There will always be oppressive societies, but when people are more open and more connected, and this was one of my points, that you can more easily find people who are just like you, so therefore you are less oppressed. So, for instance, if you would be deemed to live in a closed-off country that is oppressive towards who you are, you would then, because of low privacy standards, because of all these online social networking things that happen nowadays, you still can't find people who are like you in other places of the world. Therefore, you can confirm that it is not me who is wrong to be oppressed. It is them who are wrong for oppressing me. For this reason, we think that they don't really have a point in this. So, since my time is very up, I think that what we try to tell you here today so far is that firstly it allows you a more liberate way to express your identity, is much less oppressive, and secondly it creates a society with more bonds of trust, and it's easier for people to create these bonds of trust. Therefore we think that it's okay, and we're happy that privacy is dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the proposing side for presenting a very compelling case. But I would think that if the Prime Minister knew that actually his very nice jacket has been sold to him by exploiting his insecurities about whether he is a very good debater, then he would probably say that yes, the system that totally denounces privacy and the system that guarantees no protection for the information of the personal information that the person does not want to appeal, and then it dictates certain actions to the people, then he would be opposed to that system. And these are the major reasons why we are opposed to that system too. I'm first going to rebuttal, and secondly I'm going to elaborate on two major points why we firmly stand in favor of more privacy protection. So the first thing the proposition has told to you is that, look, that the privacy concept is fluid. It has changed over time, and now people assign less value to that privacy. We say, and therefore now they can express better themselves. We say, fine. It's good that maybe now sexuality has become a public domain, and those people who assign a value in expressing their sexuality publicly, they can now act more freely. But that is not an argument where we should have a system if we have people who do not want to express things about their sexuality in public domain, they would be forced to, because there would be no mechanism of protection of their particular identity. So they're kind of imposing this blanket policy by saying that, okay, because the majority of people do not value privacy, therefore we should not have a protective mechanism, and we should not protect those people who may still value their privacy and may still not exercise and not create their identity by telling everybody who they are, but just by telling that someone special who they are, not necessarily for the public. Now, the second thing, he says, okay, so it's much easier for people to express and to form their identities once they are able to express everything to the public domain. And we say to that, okay, we agree with you that it's always been, your identity is always a part of what the public knows about you and what only you know about yourself, right? But we say it's up to a person to say and to control the amount of information that public knows about you. Now imagine the situation that public knows everything about you. What kind of harms does that create? It means that you lose full control of who is using that information and in what ways that information is being used. And we know that public has certain tendencies. For example, they tend to have biases towards concentration on negative information. They tend to exaggerate that information. They tend to concentrate on something that is controversial. And this is what kind of information that is going to be spread by the public about you, and you will have no control about that. Therefore, you may wish not to say certain information to the public so that you would not lose control about actually who you are. Because, as they say, who you are is what you think who you are, but also what public thinks who you are. No, thank you. And finally, they say, okay, social interactions are going to be better. We have less privacy. What we say to that, as I already mentioned in my point of information, but you talk about those ideal societies, which are fully tolerant, but they unfortunately do not exist. Societies are, to a big extent, quite coercive. They want us to be conformist to the values that they believe in, meaning that if you fully denounce privacy, it's not that the individuals will fully express who they are. They will just suppress their actual actions, and they won't behave as who they are, but they will behave as the society is requiring from them. So now, when they lose this not private domain where they could act as they wish to, right? And they have to conform to the societal norms, so they lose this value of self-expression, even though that self-expression used to be not in the society, but used to be in more private space, right? So we think that is not going to enhance social interactions, because the societies we are talking about realistically are not that tolerant as they are speaking about. Yes?
This is no different than the status quo. At the point where you still cannot control what you think, you can still shape your identity through your actions and not make your identity public if you do not want to. How is that different from status quo, what we propose, that the government doesn't control it anymore?
That's a very good point. And this is where I move to my particular case, where I'm going to talk about two major points. First, we're going to prove why privacy still has universal value for the people. And second, I'm going to talk why the environment has changed to a certain extent when the person, even if he wants to control what kind of information he reveals to the public, he's not empowered to control that, due to all the various points where information about the person is being collected. So this is an answer to your point, that basically we are currently in the situation where individuals cannot control what kind of amount of privacy they are revealing to the public, and therefore we need more regulation and more intervention in order to enable individuals to do so. Now, to my first point. So why we still believe, as opposed to what the government believes, is that the privacy is universally valuable. We have 3 points for that. Well, first of all, we say that privacy is needed to exercise full control of your identity. And this is something I already, to some extent, elaborated, right? It means that if all information that you have about yourself would also be available to the public, which is increasingly true due to the invasive technologies that both the companies and the governments are using on individuals, that means that information becomes a public domain, and how that information is positioned, interpreted, how the biases are created is not within your control, but is within the control of the public, and we say the public in many cases is evil, right? So if you lose that control, it means that it's not you who can fully form who you are, but it's the evil public forms the perception of the other public towards you and who you are. So basically you lose that control of your identity creation, which we don't like, and that's why we like certain things for people to be kept for themselves rather than by the public. The second thing why the privacy is universally valuable, we say, is because privacy is needed for self-expression. And I already mentioned to some extent that usually the societies, and maybe this society is tolerant enough, right? But there are other societies in the world which have, which have much stronger entrenched norms about what kind of behavior is deemed to be appropriate, right, in the public domain. So if individuals can no longer just have this private space where they can act as they want, and all the things they do are going to be revealed to the public, therefore the individuals will become more conformist to the public norms, which may not necessarily correspond to the best way of living as they as individuals understand. It means that they lose this value of having privacy and behaving the way they want to, because there are certain coercive powers in public that force them to behave exactly according to the norms of the public. Second thing under that point, is that individuals lose value of self-expression because the meaningful, authentic relations you can form with very special people that you're friends with or you have other bonds with, they also lose value, meaning that usually authentic relations are being formed by revealing the information about yourself to a person that you don't reveal to the public. Now, if everything about you is known by the public, you lose that ability to differentiate between who is that special individual that knows something about you that nobody else knows you. So authenticity of the relationship is also severely harmed under that system where no privacy is being protected. And now the final thing about that, why the privacy is valuable, and that's very important, because the personal autonomy to make decisions really suffers. And we already have situations when, especially the private sector, which is always profit-seeking, it is already exploiting information about individual behavior, about so what are the likes and the dislikes of the individual, what are the patterns of the individual, what are the irrationalities and insecurities that I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, that we as a profit seekers can exploit by making that individual behave in a certain way that we want to. So for example, purchase a specific good, right? So we say if we don't protect privacy, if we reveal more information out there in the form of big data that the companies could analyze, they can make better insights about your behavioral patterns, and they can make offers to you that strike directly towards your irrationality and force you to make decisions that would not be in your own best interest, right? So this is where we want to protect the individual autonomy to make those decisions rather than the power of the profit seekers in order to influence those individuals. Right, so this is why we value privacy for all those reasons. And just to finish it off, the last point about why the current situation is so different that it's no longer sufficient to have the identity or privacy protection mechanism that we already had, and we have to do more. And that's a very simple explanation. We all know that the sources and the points where companies and governments collect information about individuals, be it social media, be it camera surveillance, be it collection of biological data about persons. This is what we call the rise of the big data. This is a current trend here in the society. So all those external parties already know much more about individuals than sometimes we do. And what is more important, we also have a trend of coming of Internet of Things, which will provide all the public domain even more information about how we behave, because everything is going to be connected to the Internet. So every step of ours is going to be known to somebody, not just for us. And why is that particularly dangerous? Because there's also a rise of the industry of big data mining, meaning that by connecting different parts of the data points, a certain intermediaries, a certain analytical companies can make insights about your behavior, about your irrationalities, about your insecurities that even you yourself don't know. So there was this very famous case about a specific shop called Trend, which is in UK, which actually by combining the data about shopping trends, but combining the data about social media patterns of individuals, they could in advance predict whether a woman, a potential buyer, is already pregnant, which is a very private information. And actually they guessed it very directly, right? So this is something that you could argue that individuals can control information about themselves, what they reveal, but the point is that they don't know what kind of insights the companies can generate by connecting different points of that information, and how that is going to impact the ability of those companies to impact how those individuals act, not necessarily in the way which is valuable for them. So because privacy matters, and because individuals cannot control already what kind of information that they reveal to others, we beg that there has to be more control for privacy. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to talk about two concepts of liberty. We are here to say that while Arvidas thinks that when you are forced to express things about yourself that you otherwise wouldn't, that takes away your freedom, we say that gives you freedom. Just as being forced not to try heroin when you were in college gave you the freedom to become the person that you are today. Now, thank you for the only 5 minutes too long speech, Arvidas. I'm going to, first of all, quickly go over and talk about some of the interesting points that we just heard. Then I'm going to talk about exploitation and about the benefits of all this whole big data and things that Arvidas thought would be a problem. So, a few of the things that we just heard. Arvidas told us that the media and the society tend to exaggerate things. This, just as the concept of privacy, is going to change, and this has changed throughout history. Right? If you look at the example that Gediminas gave you about men not being allowed to show emotions in public, if a powerful man cried and someone saw it 100 years ago, the media would exaggerate it and would make it into a headline. Today we don't care, because we have learned to embrace that both men and women have the same capacity to be emotional, to cry, and to be affected by things. Okay? So we believe that, yes, Arvidas is right, that the media today, in the world that we are used to live in, exaggerates certain kinds of things. But this is going to change, and the less privacy we have and the more data we have out in the open, the more things there are going to be that we don't care about, just like we don't care about men crying. The more things there are going to be that you can exaggerate about, but it's not going to change anything. Right? So we don't believe that this is an inherent problem. Secondly, or next, Arvidas tells us that being able to control what information goes out from your home and having privacy gives you control of your identity, or gives you the right or possibility to have identity. We do not agree with that. Having the capacity to take actions gives you the possibility to have an identity. Having the decision to either litter in the street or not gives you the capacity to create your identity. Privacy gives you the ability to have 100 different identities and never having to have them put in harmony. You can be a fierce feminism proclaimer in public, but at home you can still try to patronize your wife and try to have her do all the home chores even though she works more than you. No, thank you. Right? This is what privacy gives you. You can have two identities and it's not going to be a problem. So we believe that actions are what should give you the right to have to your identity. If you want to be pro-environment, you should show it with your actions and no longer have the convenient possibility of hiding behind privacy. Next, Arvidas tells you that having no privacy takes away the mean that we have to form special connections. That now if I come up to you and I tell you something about my sex life, you will not feel special because I shared it with you, because I already share with everyone anyway, because there's a camera in my bedroom. Right? Two things to that. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that those things that make connections special will just move to a new domain. It will no longer be whether or not I share my feelings for my wife with you, but it will now be some more deeper things that will set you apart from the data that can be collected. And this will change in time and change and go deeper and deeper, and we're okay with that. But secondly, even in the world where you have no privacy, you still have 24 hours to spend with people. So there will still be connections and there will still be people with whom you spend time who will feel a little bit more special, and people who you just send an occasional Christmas card who will feel a little bit less special. So we don't believe that either. Let's talk about exploitation. Two things that I want to talk about. First of all, it's hyped. The risk of exploitation is hyped for two reasons, or 2 points under this. First of all, there are almost no examples of big data being exploited, right? And we will be curious to hear from the other team, but we say that there are almost no examples, and we have been collecting all kinds of data for decades, right? Take the example of banks, right? For at least 30 years, your bank has known exactly where you have bought what, right? Unless you still use cash, which is improbable. So most banks know about most things most people do. And we don't see banks being irresponsible with the data, right? So we believe that we can have this system, and we should not be as afraid of risks, right? No thanks. Secondly, so we believe that there might be a risk, but it's exaggerated. Secondly, every generation is more and more resistant to being exploited by this data. Right? Just as we here are very resistant to advertisement, because we grew up seeing advertisement everywhere, we don't feel very manipulated because Coca-Cola is trying to sell its product with, I don't know, naked women on the poster, right? Because we already see it, we already know what's going on, and we kind of try to navigate through the internet and through all the advertisements, make our decision, but we don't really feel like we're being manipulated. I believe we are not. Right? The next generation will be more and more resistant. And whatever are the new things that Arvidas's evil companies come up with, we believe that the next generation will be able to resist that and once again see it for what it is and make the decision freely once again. Okay, finally, we're going to say that we are willing to accept the risk. Right? Just as when we started the democracy, we were willing to accept the risk that maybe we're going to elect the wrong leader and he's going to ruin this country, it was worth it. We believe that this is going to be worth it, that for all the reasons that we have already brought here and are going to bring throughout the rest of the speeches that we have, it's worth taking the risk. It's okay. It's okay even if there is a possibility of cataclysm. Right? Just like with nuclear power plants, there's a slight possibility that we're going to blow up a whole country and it never will be habitable again. But it's necessary. It's something we still do because we find that the benefits we get from nuclear power is worth it. Right? So that 0.00 and all the zeros, 1% of risk is okay and something we're going to take. Finally, the other side of the coin that Arvidas presented to us. Companies and big data. We believe there are huge benefits that we can exploit more if we had less privacy. First of all, products and services. Right? I believe you've heard, if you haven't, then Amazon has this, I'm not sure if it's preemptive shipping or something like that, has the program when they ship a product next to where you live before you have bought it, because they know that you're probably going to buy it soon. Right? They bear the costs of doing that. If you don't buy the product, it just goes back. But that means that if you now do decide to buy the product, which you were likely to buy based on your previous purchasing patterns, now you can have it in one day or maybe half a day. You don't have to wait for 2 weeks to get it shipped and so on. Right? That makes my life easier and better. If today I want to get this computer, I will get it right now. Right? I talked about banks. Right? I can go online now, I can look at what I have bought. If someone uses my credit card somewhere, it will automatically be detected. That's because banks collect all that information. Because whenever someone uses my card, it is registered there, and I can still see it 2 years later, right? And I can still file a claim to say that this was not me, this was someone else, I want this change, right? So there's the other side of the same coin that we believe is going to once again outweigh the negligible harms or risks that they have brought, right? Bearing in mind all these things that Gediminas has also talked about, how for my identity it's also good to be here and not be embarrassed for my weird fetishes that probably many of you share as well, but we cannot talk about this because, well, we're afraid that maybe if I say it, then it will come out that you don't have that fetish and then it will be weird for 5 minutes. Okay, finally, data mining and what Arvidas talked about is a good thing, right? Classical research can only get you where you thought you are going to go, right? You can only use it to pursue the theory that you have before. Sometimes, rarely, you get some serendipitous discoveries because something happens, but usually if you're going to do the research the regular way, you have to already posit something, then you ask people questions, and that's the only answer you get. If you collect everything about that person, you can come up with so much more, right? You might find that there's a connection between getting a heart attack and, I don't know, having 2 dogs, for example, right? You might find out that there's a real scientific relation saying that if you have 2 or more dogs, you're more likely to get a heart attack because of the way you interact with them, whatever, right? These are the weird things that big data can give us. Right? Just for reference, this is not something that has been found, but just an example that I just thought up right now. But these are the things that we can have, right? We cannot have this if you're forced to go to people's homes and ask them questions about their lifestyle to try to determine their heart attack risk, because you will never come up with a question like, how many dogs do you have, right? Or maybe that is even a little bit obvious, but there's more in-depth connections that are hidden. Right, so having only exceeded my time by 2 minutes, I now rest this case, at least for now, from the side proposition and give the word to the other side. Thank you.
Can I use your timer? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's start off with a few points of rebuttal and then move on to our case furthermore. Okay, first of all, what Victor tells us is that if you have the ability to take actions, then you can create this one identity, this strong identity, and show it to the public and so on. Well, and in privacy you can have multiple identities and do bad things. Okay, well, first of all, we see that you can always go offline. If you see that privacy is a problem for you, if you need privacy and you can't get it online, then you can go offline, and offline you can also have dual personalities, and therefore we see that this problem stays either way, and less privacy does not make that problem go away. Okay. Now, it tells us how we have, with this exploited data, we have no problems, we have never had any problems with that, we're completely fine on that because everyone controls everything. Okay, well, we see identity theft might be a bit of a problem for people. So if someone, like, steals my credit card, then it's not really that simple, as Victor has told us, how you can go online and look how what payments have been made. It can ruin people's lives for years, and that is a major problem because all kind of crimes or felonies can be done with those identity thefts, and those might not be that easily traced. Okay. Then he tells us how even though Coca-Cola makes commercials which are supposed to manipulate us, so we would buy it, we don't feel that manipulated, and next generations won't as well. Well, that's a huge maybe. So even though they might not be as manipulated, they still might, and that is really not the risk we're willing to take. Okay, tells us about companies exploiting data, how things are like shipped near your home before you buy them, because you might buy them because we have watched what you have bought before. Okay, we have brought the example of a woman being pregnant and the company knowing about it, so giving her all kind of flyers and things about pregnancy products because they already knew she was pregnant before she knew it. That might be, firstly, really scary for a person, secondly, really invading their privacy, and no thank you. The reasons I will now talk on further in different ways. Firstly, let's talk about rationality. We have an example of a plane. 50% of plane crashes and accidents happen because of human mistakes, the mistakes of pilots. Okay, we have systems and mechanisms of bringing a plane up from the ground to its destination and back on the ground without a pilot, with only a mechanism. And now, that means if we don't have a pilot, which makes like 50% of accidents, then we have 50% less accidents. But still, 90% of people refuse to get on a plane which does not have a pilot. Therefore, we see how even though it might be actually safer for people, people might not feel that it's safer. The same thing goes for privacy. We feel that privacy is that important to us, and without it, if we don't see anyone guarding it anymore, we feel vulnerable. We feel that everyone can see all information about us, and we don't know what they might do. So we have two groups after we will lose all privacy. First of all, the group A, which don't care and keep clicking on all those OK buttons and so on, but they also must be protected for things that they might do, because that they do not really understand how much information they put online about themselves. Therefore, they must be protected and their privacy must be guarded. The second group, the group B, is which will start feeling fear. Now, I don't have my privacy anymore, no one is protecting it, I don't know what's happening really online, I also don't understand how much information I have online about me, and therefore we see how those people might get offline, and offline they will be like completely segregated from a part of a society, because everything happens online now, and if you're offline, you might not get into what is happening online. Therefore, you have the pressure to opt in. You can say that everyone can opt out and go offline, but then you have the pressure. Because if you're offline, you're segregated from the society. Like, you have difficulty socializing because everyone else is online. A simple example. Well, you're trying to look for a girlfriend, boyfriend. Well, it's difficult for you because people actually do have that bias right now. How do you think that you don't have Facebook? What's wrong with you? Therefore, we see how it will make a lot of people's lives a lot more difficult, and therefore they have this pressure of opting in and really have no option at all. Now, those people, well, people, yeah. Anyway, let's. Okay.
Most of the people who have internet also have Facebook, so I don't see how big is the problem you're actually talking about.
Okay, yes, most people who have internet mostly have Facebook. Yes, that's what's happening right now. But if we don't have any kind of privacy at all right now, when I'm on Facebook, when I'm online, I'm doing my clicks, clicking OK, clicking accept, I think that there are some mechanisms, some systems guarding me, and that makes me feel safer because I have my privacy. But if we lose that, if we lose all that, we don't have that anymore, I might feel fear how nothing is there to protect me anymore, and I myself am not able to. Okay, talking more about the exploited data. Okay, we see how that what Arvidas has told us about is how companies can take your information and use it to predict what you're going to do before even you know it. Okay, we see how we give out all that kind of information to the internet. To like our bank accounts are in banks protected there. Like we have Google, we give incredibly a lot of information to Google. And now imagine if someone took that information and used it for purposes not suitable for us. Right now we don't see it happening because we are protected from it, but if we lose all our privacy, everything that is on Google about us, well, if that's not protected anymore, then we will lose a lot of safety and really, really bad things can happen. And for all those reasons, we are really happy to oppose. Thank you very much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to talk about how death of privacy is actually something we can never really avoid. Not anymore. The idea of having our own separate lives and living in a separate field where everything is under our control is an idea of the past that they have not proven that we can maintain in any kind of a reasonable sense anymore in today's world. Because we do live in a world where information is everywhere, where technology is everywhere, and we cannot simply revert back to a state where we don't have those things and think that that is better. And me and my colleagues, we actually not only believe that it's inescapable, but we also believe that it can be a force for good in many ways, and that we can make it a force for good in many ways. And we also think that generally the value that we put on privacy as a value is basically a social construct. There's nothing inherently valuable about it. It's just that we've been taught to believe that it's good. But the difference is that the generations that will grow up now will not necessarily believe in that. And Doris tells us that it's scary, right? And we agree with that. Yes, every change is scary. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pursue it, that we shouldn't go for those things, because they will often bring us a lot of good things as well in the end. So let's talk a bit about what Victor talked about those practical benefits, right? Well, one thing they have an issue with is that companies will control your data and exploit you. First of all, we think that finding out what you really like and going through the millions and millions of choices, and like those choices are increasing every single day, that's actually tiring, that's limiting your opportunities to do other things in your life that are also meaningful to you, right? What is much more easier for you is to actually have someone offer you things that you're likely to like and likely to want. That actually saves you time and gives you the possibility to do other things with your life rather than going through a lot of shops and trying to find that one dress you might like, because now it will be offered to you and you won't have to search for that. So what's so bad about this? Like 100 years ago, colorful advertisements seemed like an exploitative idea. But now we're fine with that because they inform us of things that we might like, and they inform us of the attributes of those things we might like. And they actually help us out in our lives to choose the things that are actually the most beneficial for us. And we think that's really, really good, right? And no, thank you. We also think that people are generally already okay with the fact that they're sharing their private information with companies. Like the majority of people on Facebook are already doing this, and they don't see a big problem with that, right? And they tell us, well, it's because people don't know, because they expect to be protected, right? But we think as well, as we become more accustomed to the new world we live in, we'll understand that sometimes we have to be careful when we have to choose these things and what those things mean. It's just the fact that now it's new and now it's scary doesn't mean that we shouldn't go for it. But I want to really talk about this thing that I think this debate really boils down to. And it's things like identity, trust, and accountability, and how we actually shape our understanding of ourselves into this new world, right? So Gediminas, in the first speech from our side, he explains how identity can now become a line between like what you are in public and what you are in private. And we think that's a really great thing because those things are not separate anymore once privacy is broken down. But then the next speaker comes from their side and he says, like, you should not be forced to opt into this. But the thing is, unless the barriers of privacy are broken down as a social norm, the social norm is then to not be public about these things. So what is then better? If we have social pressure either way, we think it's better that those two things are aligned, that you can be both publicly and privately the same person, that you can express yourself freely in a way that really comes down to who you are, and that's fine. Secondly, we think that separate identities become generally more accepted when we actually have them out in the open. Things like mistakes that we all make in our past, right? When you get drunk and take a stupid picture, sometimes it ends up online, and we think, oh my God, that's a bad thing. But once we don't have that privacy protection, we realize that everybody makes those kinds of mistakes. Men do sometimes cry, right? And sometimes we're not really perfect. Sometimes this, like, what we have, and what we have had for the past centuries, is this kind of facade that we build for the outside world. But it's a false one, right? It's a false one where we pretend to be better than we are, and we actually see everyone else being so perfect, we feel constantly socially pressured to be perfect, but we're not, right? And that's perfectly fine, and we understand that once we understand that in our private spheres of life, in the things that we supposedly hide, we do make mistakes and we're not perfect, right? I would take a question if there was one right now, but apparently,
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you still haven't dealt with the point that we live in imperfect societies, and what suppresses people's identities and their expression is not the fact whether they can reveal it to public or not, but the fact that publics already hold certain entrenched political and moral values. So if you force individuals only to reveal their values in public, they will suffer that suppression, and they can't exercise that privately.
Okay, so that's exactly what I was intending to talk about. So they tell us that societies are exploitative and discriminatory and they're not perfect. But what is the way we break down those things, right? If we think about it, actually having all those different identities in the open creates more empathy, more understanding, and more openness. Those are the things we need to actually break down ideas like discrimination, the ideas that someone is lesser than me, the ideas that someone is so different than me that they're not really human, right? We understand that we're all alike in some ways, and that often comes through our understanding and seeing of the private sphere, where we're inherently flawed, yes, but we're all human. We all generally share the same fears and values and all kinds of things, right? We have so much in common as well. They also talk about intimacy and that you're going to be losing agency with regard to that. But what we tell you and what we've told you is that, just revealing facts is never enough. What we've told you is that actions should be the things that shape both your intimacy and your relationships to other people, because facts are just facts. And you should be really doing more than that. Because and we think that that way you can actually make all those relationships far more meaningful. We are also accountable like never before, right? We cannot put up a lie. We can no longer hide. We think that hiding in general is exhausting, it's limiting, it's a false like a false idea of who you are. We think that a society that is more free is a society where you can truly be who you want to be, in ways you want to be, and where who you are privately becomes who you are publicly. And that is the major benefit we get on our side of the house that they somehow want to oppose. For all those reasons, I'm very proud to stand on this side of the house. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about 4 points. First of all, I'm going to talk about how molding your identity via self-expression is something that can be done under our system, and, well, under their system, we're just creating extra problems, actually, to the society. Second of all, let's talk about how in their system, actually, when we do want to form human relations, what we are creating, actually, is that we're creating a segregation, and we're creating harms to many people which perform a major minority in the society. Third of all, let's talk about how one of the biggest problems here we have is that people do not actually understand what it is to be online and what it is, what is your identity on the internet and how it actually affects you. And fourth of all, let's talk about how then, because you don't actually understand, it's so easy to exploit you either via companies or via criminal activity. So, sounds easy? Let's go through it. So, like, Prop lives in this ideal world where we kind of have the situation that when everyone gives all of their information out, everyone will understand everyone and everyone will, well, basically be one happy family. Unfortunately, the world isn't kind of like that. It kind of would be if, let's say, for example, in Alabama, where basically gay activism is a frowned upon topic, for example. If all that information came out and turns out that 75% of Alabama is actually gay, would work probably. But unfortunately, that would, alas, would not be the situation. Yes, if that information came out, those people would have 3, 4 more friends probably who are in the same situation. But they still would be a distinct minority. And the majority of the people still would actually repress them. The situation we will then have is that the people right now who have the possibility of being anonymous, basically, being who they are, basically inside their own room, being who they want to be there, and having at least one place where they can express themselves, now basically start to lose that place. Basically, they do make a couple of friends who are in a similar situation. But even if we look at the camps we have in Texas and Alabama, which are conversion camps, basically, you have loads of people with the same problem, not problem, but the same situation, that they are gay and they're forced into these conversion camps. They're together there. They could be a group, but they're still being brainwashed and repressed because you have the big majority who doesn't agree upon who they are, which means that actually what they want to have is not happening. The people are not being accepted into the society. The people are trying to be conversed into being someone who they are not. In a moment. Let's say 30 seconds. Okay. Okay, which means that like the only option they have is actually going offline and opting out basically of the system, going completely offline. The thing here is that right now, at that situation, they still will have dual personalities. They have one personality that they have to keep inside of them, and they cannot let anyone else know, not in an online community, nowhere, because the moment they do it, snap, they're out. That means that they will be repressed. we see that this is a big problem, that now they don't even have any friends who to talk to and then get any help, and that is really bad for actually their personality and who they are. Yes, go.
So the problem with the situation that you're talking about is that situation is where no positive change happens. When people are forced to hide their identities in private, then the public doesn't have to address this discussion. When people in Alabama have to be publicly homosexual, then society starts having the discussion. When these people start being publicly homosexual in more liberal states like New York, this is where gay rights initially happened. Don't you think so?
Well, the moment that the US started publicly talking about making it a federal law that you have gay marriage, states like Alabama started talking about the subject upon, we're never ever going to make it state law. We don't care about federal law, and that created another system. So there is a public discussion, but as long as the majority in these places does not actually agree with what, I don't know, the minority wants, it's really hard to do anything about it. The discussions are not progressive, and the discussions will not lead to the consequences they want. No, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about forming human relations. So, Prop says it's really easy now you're online. I kind of do agree that it's kind of easy to see a random person on Facebook, go there, say hello, how are you, etc. At the same time, like, if all of your information is out there, it's really easy to see all of your information. It's a whole other thing to actually interpret what the person is. So you might have all the data everywhere and everything, but as long as you cannot actually, interpret it, and this is why you need actual human interaction. That's why you cannot look everything up on a paper. And that's why we see that everything shouldn't be, basically, first of all, seen to everyone, because there should be some things you only want to reveal to someone, and when you want to reveal to someone, etc. The other thing is that we're talking about the minority who doesn't want to be online, so to say. We're talking about those people who feel that they are too afraid to actually be in this system, who value their privacy. We see that these people are being segregated because they are seen now as outcasts. You're not using Facebook. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with that person? Do I dare to go out on a date with a person who's not on Facebook? Is that person a murderer? What's happening? Those are the things that go through a normal person's mind when they look at a person who is different from the social norm. And what we see with the internet and the social media, etc., is the moment you give too much information about, out there, and when it's the norm, the people who do not use it are really segregated from the society because others don't understand why they value privacy. So, moving on to the third point, talking about understanding the internet. So, this is the thing right now. Every day, I think that most people here have a Google account, probably most also have Facebook accounts, etc. And every time you make a new account somewhere, you have a huge, long, a big list of things, an agreement you need to tick and say, oh, I agree with everything. Most people just say, okay, it's a huge contract, scroll, accept, no reading. They don't actually understand what they are agreeing upon to. That when you create your Google account, you are basically giving, well, half of what you are to this company to use how they want. And every day we're clicking in different places and giving this access to all kind of different areas, never knowing, never understanding what we are actually giving, that we are giving basically all of our information that can be exploited to these companies. And this is especially the reason why we need protection from the state. Because the state is the only actor right now who is in between of these companies or whatever, whoever it is, actually exploiting this information. We see that what happens is that when the state officially doesn't care about privacy anymore, you will have probably many groups of people, more people than right now, who will think, okay, if the state is not protecting my identity anymore, if it's not protecting my privacy anymore, then I need to opt out of this system. Because This is the only way, actually, I can guarantee that my safety is being secured. So, what happens then is, we see that more people actually opt out of the system. And we have an even bigger segregation in the society between, we create a new minority, basically. A minority of people who are offline and online, which is never a good thing, because we're just switching, even if all of their things happen, we're just switching one situation of minority problems to another situation of minority problems. And that is never a good thing. So, lastly, and I think how much I'm almost catching up with Arvidas' speech. Okay. Exploitation of your information. So, we have these cool companies right now who know, and this is what they say, like, these companies now know what you want to buy. So basically what their huge benefit is, when you go on Google, it's easier for you to search which kind of a jacket do I want to buy today. Okay. I see the thing is that if all of that is just that, then it's okay. But I see a problem where these companies use your weaknesses, your problems, in order to exploit you, in coercing you to buy something. Let's say, I don't know, you feel that you have a problem with your weight. This is a weakness you have. Let's say you have a gambling issue, whatever. All of these kinds of things can be and will be exploited if you don't have protection against this. We see that if these things are exploited, then people severely will get hurt because of it. If your weaknesses are exploited by the companies, and you buy things that do not actually help you and don't get you actually better, we see that this is a huge problem for you. And we see that this is the situation where the state needs to intervene and say, no, we don't want you to have access to people's weaknesses, because there is a huge threat. Even if it's a potential threat, it's a huge threat that we shouldn't have in the society. And finally, we of course have, well, the problem of criminal activity, because although proposition doesn't see it as a big thing, I kind of don't want my identity being stolen, and making, like, what they want to do is, if all of your information is really, really simple, it's kind of with your bank. So you go to your bank, you get your credit card. Basically, people think that the only line of the line of defense is you have your PIN code, and that's your line of defense. No, your line of defense is all the information you give them, all the information about you. That's the primary line of defense against identity theft, against credit card theft, etc. We see that the moment we get away from that, we're removing the PIN, everything, except for one small thing, 4 numbers, for people to actually exploit you. For these reasons, I beg you to oppose this motion.
Okay, let's thank the last speaker for his overly long speech. And now, the last part of this debate, and to see whether we engage you, whether you liked it, we shall have a small show of hands, like a vote of not which opinion do you believe in more, whether we should have more privacy or not, but which side perhaps you found more convincing in the way they argued, because that was the point of this educational exercise. So those of you who thought that the proposition side was more convincing in their argumentation, please raise their hands up high so we can count them. And someone can help me count also. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So it seems we have kind of a 50-50 split. Great. We can just have a show of hands for the opposition side then as well. Yeah. So, okay, so pretty much friendship wins the day.
I'd like to thank our debaters for an excellent introduction to today's topic, which we shall be continuing shortly, to this year's theme. Now we're going to have a short break, during which you will have the opportunity to take your coffee outside, if you wish, and to listen to recordings of 2 essays by Jesajas Berlina, both in English and in Latvian, via the audio shower installation provided by Satori. Or those of you who speak Latvian might pick up a copy, a hard copy, of the Satori summer issue, the theme of which is freedom, and there's quite a few interesting essays in that. So we will see you back at, what time? 2:30 down here. Enjoy your drink, your coffee, and enjoy your networking.